Okay, I'm here in London and I've been joined by John and Arnie from Stoic, and we are talking about the Banner Saga 2, which is about to launch imminently on PC and then consoles further down the line. It's a sequel to a very choice-driven RPG with tactical elements. And the thing that I want to ask you first is about how you're managing the transition for established players who played the first game, and also what you're doing for new players who maybe haven't played the first game at all, and how you're going to get them on board.
Right. Well, oddly enough, in the first one, we kind of threw people in the deep end anyway, so it was rather confusing for some players in Saga 1. But leading into Saga 2, we're making some nods in the second one to the first, but also we put together a whole video that players can watch if they've never played the Banner Saga 1. That's a recap video, and right on the front page, you just click Watch Recap Video, and we basically cover all the high points for the player to catch them up.
It's even useful for old players who haven't played the game in a couple of years.
Right.
I mean, when I sat down and have a look at the demo, and one of the first choices is you're given a choice between two different characters to play, which immediately took me back to the end of the first game and some really horrible decisions that I had to make back then. I suppose getting that kind of seriousness of what happened before is part of the big challenge with kind of introducing new players.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you play Rook or Alette, we'll go into the story a bit for the new player, explain what can happen, and or explain kind of what happened and how they feel emotionally about it after that. But we only make nods to it. We really hope the players play Saga 1, because to do it justice, we'd have to take too much time, and the players that actually played Saga 1 would be saying, wait a minute, I already played, let's get on with the story. So we basically did get on with the story, making nods to it as we could.
Yeah, for new players, there are certain key elements of the first game that you need to know about. You need to know why you got here, but you don't need to know every single thing. The characters are fairly self-explanatory. You can learn the characters as you go. We tell you what you need to know, but we don't overload you with information if you haven't played it before. But we're hoping, and we think it's the case, that new players will feel, if they don't want to go back and play the first game, they will feel like it's a self-contained and not confusing experience.
Okay, so talking about new stuff that's coming into the game, there's a new race, a new type of people that you'll be interacting with. What can you tell us about them, and how do they differ from what we've already seen?
Yeah, so we're introducing the Horseborn, who are based after the Bronze Age Celts, and also it's a cross between Bronze Age Celts on the way they dress, and also the Icelandic ponies. So these are very small, short, fast, sure-footed race, but the thing that's interesting about them is in combat they're going to be moving a lot more fast than the humans and the Varls. So all their combat abilities are designed around movement and positioning, and hopefully it really opens up the combat field.
Yeah, one of them in particular has the ability to move, attack, and then move again. So they're very mobile, so they can get in position for their next attack or run away and
then
avoid.
The female can move extra tiles much further, but that's just their combat mechanics. Their story is going to be very big in Saga 2. We kind of introduce them, and the player gets to know them, and then they're going to be very important in Saga 3. So the game's been designed as a three-part story, as you know.
Okay, well you touched on combat there. One thing that you've said to me already today, and I think everybody who played the first game would agree with, is towards the end, the combat could have been perhaps a little bit more lively. What are you doing with the Banner Saga 2 to kind of add more variety to the combat scenarios?
Well, several different things actually. One of the first things we did was to add a lot more scripted storytelling to the combat. So the characters interact during the combat. They speak to each other. There's animations, and the combat scenarios will change during the combat. New enemies will appear. The scenario will change. Different battles have different win conditions. Maybe you're trying to break through or protect someone for a certain amount of time, instead of just the same, defeat all the enemies. Yeah, we've added destructible obstacles, barricades that can be used for tactical effect. You can use them to protect your archers, for instance, and to control the movement of the enemies. These are destroyable obstacles, so the enemies or yourself can choose to spend a turn or two to get rid of them, to open up a lane of attack. But
Ultimately, I think combat in the Banner Saga 2 will feel like it's a part of the story. So the story is continuing into this combat, and with the banter of the characters and the way that the combat's been set up, rather than an aside where you're playing a game where you have a story and now you go into a combat portion, then back to the story. This will feel more like a one flowing idea.
There were a few cases in Banner Saga 1 that were like this. Like maybe the top of Richhorn, and maybe when Ivor loses his arm,
Right.
and a little bit in the final battle with Bellower. So we took those techniques and applied them pretty much universally across the game, the entire game.
A big thing we've done too is in the training tent in the first game, people could go in and we were hoping that they would just play combats over and over in the training tent to learn how to play the combat. In this one now we have directed scenarios so that you have accomplishments for. So we're taking you through the game, teaching you the different classes, and it's really fun trying to complete all these missions.
Yeah, there are 9 battles, and they're basically puzzle battles, and you can play them over and over again until you win. There's achievements and rewards for winning them, aside from just learning new techniques. So there's some advanced techniques that we know from having played the game for a long time, and we've sort of set up these scenarios to teach players both these techniques and the basics, and make sure that people really get the most out of combat, because I think it's so much more satisfying if you understand how all the mechanics work together and you're able to really take your skills to the next level, as opposed to just sort of bumbling through, which people do, and you can certainly bumble through Banner Saga 1 and just disaster after disaster and loss after loss.
And still make it to the end,
Yeah. But we want people to experience the satisfaction of mastering the combat. So we've added a lot of tutorialization, a lot of training along those lines.
It's been a while since I looked at the game, and it might just be kind of rose-tinted nostalgia. It looks really good now. Have you done extra kind of work with the kind of the visual sides? Have you increased the amount of detail and stuff, or did it always look that good?
No, I think it might have. I don't think it got better, but we certainly have put a lot more into it. And one of the reasons is in the first one I was the only artist, and right now I'm working with another fellow named Igor Artyomenko, who's from Kazakhstan, and we opened up a big a big art contest to the world, and this guy won it. So now he and I have both been doing the art for this, and it really helped. We have a lot more art in the game. We actually have a lot more story, a lot more everything than we did in Saga 1. But we were certainly shooting for hitting the same note. Now, maybe some of it is better. It's definitely possible.
There's more animation. There's more combat animation. There's more in-world animation, but also there's more cinematics. In the Banner Saga 1, there was an introductory cinematic, which was about a minute and a half, I think,
Yeah.
and that was it. Like that's you had the introductory cinematic, and then they didn't appear anywhere else. We had these sort of static cinemas where you're panning over a scene and setting up a scene. But in Banner Saga 2, we've increased the amount of full motion animation, and we've also spread it out throughout the entire game. So there's
also got more scenes, just more landscapes, more battle scenes, more. I mean, every battle scene now is in the first one. We just didn't have the bandwidth, but now everything's unique. So I hope
yeah, it's true. We reused a lot of battle scenes in the first one. We had a system of randomization where different trees and foregrounds and backgrounds would swap out and give you a variety. So every playthrough you might have a different set of battlefields.
I'm glad you still enjoy it.
Well, I mean
That's the goal.
that kind of leads me to my next question, which was, how has the success of the first one, because it has been a big success for you as a debut title for a new studio, how has that success translated in your ability to build on that and to enhance the experience the second time around?
Well, I think some of the things that John just mentioned, we've had a little bit more bandwidth to do more cinemas. I've been able to hire another artist to help me, so we've got more art in the game. We've hired a dedicated writer in Drew McGee, and he's also setting it all up in the world. So he's been able to do more writing, there's more decision points for the player in this one. And really what we had a fully fleshed out system from the first one, so all we had to do now is improve it, expand on it, polish it, and that. So without having to bite off all the work we did from Saga 1, we've really been able to take the time to improve Saga 2 over what we previously did. So I think players are going to find that it's just a lot more polished experience and more. We didn't go out of our way at all to try to change the experience. Everybody was feeding back, we love the game, we want more. So that's what we're trying to provide.
It would be a crucial mistake, and it's happened with other games as well, to take something people like and then drastically change it. We want to improve it. We want to polish things that could be polished, or smooth off any rough edges that existed, but we want it to be the same basic game mechanic.
Okay, one game mechanic that we haven't discussed yet, which I'm going to pick your brains about now, is the caravan side of the game, and moving kind of large groups of people and kind of management of that whole scenario. You told me some interesting things. I'm going to ask you to tell us in front of the camera now about what you've done to that side of the game and how you're trying to make that a more meaningful part of the story.
Well, there's several different aspects to it. Your clansmen, the people you're saving, give you some benefits. They're able to go forage for food. They require less supplies to live than the fighters do. So there's a certain advantage to having a lot of them. You gain more renown as you show your leadership skills and you're able to save them. They actually produce more renown for you. You're able to train them into fighters, which become part of the fighting force of your caravan and protect the clansmen from assault by large forces of enemies. And so there's a sort of a balancing game there, keeping the right amount of fighters to protect the clansmen, but not too many because they consume more resources and they're unable to forage.
Foraging was a big one. I think that's noticeable right off the bat. The more clansmen you have, we have a forage mechanic that during world travel they're going to be foraging along the way, and the more clansmen you have, the more supplies you're going to be getting during that. So in the first one, there was a good reason to have clansmen and keep them, but I think a lot of people just felt, you know what, it's more important for me to level up my characters or buy items. And in this one, there's going to be a lot more of a balancing act, I think, that players are going to have to manage.
One of the key places they come into play is in a war scenario. And a war scenario is when a large force is assaulting your caravan as a whole. So it's not your band of 6 heroes only fighting against some enemies. It's the whole caravan is under attack. Even your band of 6 heroes is involved in a battle that you control, but your fighters, the fighter component of your caravan is protecting the clansman component. And that's when the balance comes into play. And in the first game, we didn't really do a good job of communicating to the player how that worked, and we didn't give the player any control over how many fighters they had. So a lot of it was both outside the control of the player and very opaque. It wasn't clear. So we really made an effort to make it very clear what is happening in a war scenario, what you need to do to affect it, how many fighters you need to train, and then so both beginning and ending each war we describe in detail what happened. So that mechanic that existed in Banner Saga 1, we've expanded on it and enhanced the way that we present it to the player.
Okay, I don't want you to have to delve into too much because discovering the story for yourself is a big part of the game, but I would like to know about what drew you to this kind of mythology and obviously your interpretation of it. What was it that inspired you to kind of make a game like this?
Right, when we were first talking about this story, the story was in place and it was actually going to be just sort of medieval. I don't want to say generic, but it was sort of knights in shining armor, and the more we talked about it, I just said, and this was before Vikings got big or anything, the Vikings TV show and whatnot, but I was talking to Alex, who wrote the Banner Saga 1, and I'd always grown up in a family that came from Denmark. And when I was a kid, I used to read Viking myths and all children's stories about Vikings, and I would just hear a lot about them, Leif the Lucky and all this, and that was my interest. So going into this, I just said, hey, why don't we convert this into a Viking story? And it's funny because once we did that, it opened up kind of a whole bunch of new storylines, and we would not have had the game we have today had we not gone with Viking mythology, Norse mythology. And it's funny how it's changed. So what we have now in place, we plotted out the whole story, and we broke it up into 3 parts. And I think by the end of it, it really will feel like a Norse saga to people. It gets weirder and weirder, sometimes darker, But Norse sagas get very strange. And this is the first one was kind of setting it up. The second one, you're going to be going deeper as the player, and then of course we finish it up in the third.
Okay, so the game's been out on PC for a couple of years now. It's recently launched onto console. Banner Saga 2 is coming out very soon. Tell us release dates and release platforms.
Well, on April 19th, we'll be on Steam, PC, and Mac, and we'll be working toward getting a console release as soon as we can. We've been co-developing the console on Banner Saga 2 for several months now and testing it, so we're very close. And of course, once we finish development of Banner Saga 2, it has to go through certification and everything, so that's sort of outside of our control. But This time around, we're reusing all the technology we used for the first game. We have much more infrastructure and foundation to build on. So both the console and the mobile builds should be much quicker than last time. It took us 2 years to get the console build out last time. It's not going to be anywhere near that this time. It'll take months, a few months.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with the next couple of weeks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will survive.